Series 1, The Forbidden Spark. Part 2, Worlds Collide ****. The gala had ended, and the streets of the city were quieter now, but the storm in Olivia Harding's heart raged on. As she lay in her bed that night, staring up at the ceiling, she couldn't stop replaying the brief encounter with Samuel in the garden. His dark eyes, full of something she couldn't quite name, had left an imprint on her soul. His voice still echoed in her ears, as calm and genuine as the night air, and the feel of his touch on her arm lingered like a spark against her skin. She had spent the whole evening with her thoughts divided between her father's high society conversations and Samuel, whose presence was as disruptive as it was magnetic. The two worlds couldn't be more different, and yet, somehow, they had collided in a way that made everything else seem insignificant. Olivia tried to push it all away, tried to bury the feeling deep inside, but the pull was undeniable. The next day, she found herself standing in front of her father's office, her thoughts a tangled mess of guilt and longing. Her father, Thomas Harding, had never been easy on her. The weight of his expectations crushed her with every passing day, each decision mapped out for her in a life that seemed so carefully constructed but void of her own desires. Olivia was expected to marry a man from the right circles, someone who could maintain her father's legacy, uphold the family name, and keep the empire thriving. Samuel was nothing like that. He had no title, no wealth to offer, just a quiet, unpolished strength that made Olivia question everything she had been taught to value. Olivia, her father's voice broke her thoughts, his words clipped and impatient. I need you to come with me to the office. There's business to attend to. She nodded, her gaze fleeting toward the door as she followed him into the sterile, cold world of polished wood and sharp suits. She couldn't stop the nagging feeling that Samuel's world was where she belonged, even if it wasn't where she was meant to be. Samuel, on the other hand, hadn't stopped thinking about Olivia either. The moments they shared in the garden that night felt like a dream, a forbidden one. He had known that people like her didn't mix with people like him. She was the daughter of a wealthy mogul, and he was a mechanic who worked with his hands. He had his own burdens, his own battles, and the last thing he needed was to be swept up in the fantasy of a world he could never belong to. But despite his best efforts, he found himself looking over his shoulder every time he worked at the mechanic shop, hoping to catch a glimpse of her again. It had been a week since the gala, and while the streets of the city had returned to their usual hum, Samuel's mind still played over the moment when she had looked at him like no one else ever had. Olivia Harding, the very image of grace and sophistication, had stood in front of him, as if they were equals, and that thought gnawed at his heart. Get a grip, Samuel, he muttered to himself, wiping oil off his hands as he stood outside his small apartment. His friends had teased him about the look he'd gotten from her, but Samuel wasn't in the mood for their jokes. He knew better than to get lost in a dream that could never come true. But the more he thought about her, the harder it became to ignore the truth. He wanted to see her again. He wanted to know who she was when she wasn't playing the role of the perfect daughter or the charming heiress. He wanted to see her laugh, to know her hopes, her fears, anything that made her human, anything that made her real. As if the universe had answered his unspoken wish, Samuel's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. ***, meet me at the cafe near the bridge. I have something important to discuss. Olivia. ***. His heart skipped a beat. He stared at the screen for a moment, unsure whether it was some cruel joke or the beginning of something else. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he stared out at the city skyline. A million thoughts ran through his head, but he couldn't deny the pull, the same one that had drawn him to her that night at the gala. It was stronger than reason, stronger than fear. He knew he had to go. The cafe by the bridge was a small, quiet place, tucked away from the busy streets of the city. When Samuel arrived, he saw Olivia sitting by the window, her back to him, staring out at the river. Her dark hair cascaded over her shoulders, and for a moment, she looked lost in thought, as if she belonged to the world outside the cafe and not the one she had been born into. She turned when she heard the door open, and her face softened as their eyes met. Olivia's smile was hesitant at first, like she wasn't sure how to act around him. But there was something in the air between them that couldn't be ignored. They had crossed a line, and now there was no turning back. "You came," she said, her voice a little too quiet for the bustling noise of the cafe. "Of course I came," Samuel replied, his tone unexpectedly steady. He took a seat across from her, his heart beating a little faster than he'd like to admit. "You said you had something to discuss." Olivia hesitated, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "I wanted to apologize," she began, her voice tinged with a hint of vulnerability, "for how things ended the other night. My father, he expects so much from me. I can't always just follow my heart." Samuel leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on her. The vulnerability in her words caught him off guard. It wasn't something he had expected from someone like her, the daughter of a man whose name commanded respect and fear across the city. "You don't have to apologize," he said softly. "I get it. You're caught between two worlds." Her eyes met his, a mixture of gratitude and sadness in them. "Exactly. And I can't help but feel like I don't belong in either of them." There it was again, that feeling, that pull. Samuel didn't know what to say, so he stayed silent, letting the moment linger between them. Finally, Olivia spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Samuel, I can't stop thinking about you." The words hung in the air, thick and heavy. For a moment, neither of them moved. It felt like the world had frozen in place, just for them. "I know," Samuel said quietly, his voice a mixture of disbelief and longing. "I can't stop thinking about you either." And just like that, their worlds collided once more. Olivia knew this wasn't the safest path. She knew the consequences of stepping outside her carefully crafted world. But something deep inside her told her that she couldn't go back, that she couldn't forget Samuel. And Samuel, too, felt the same burning desire to hold on to the moment, to hold on to her. But as their connection grew, so did the dangers surrounding them. The truth about Olivia's family, the pressure from her father, and the fierce jealousy of those in their lives were already threatening to tear them apart. But for now, none of that mattered. For now, all that mattered was the fire between them, burning bright and unyielding. The days following their meeting were a blur for Olivia. She tried to carry on with her life as usual, attending social events and carrying out her duties as the daughter of a wealthy mogul. But every time she stood in front of a mirror, every time she interacted with her father, a gnawing emptiness tugged at her. She couldn't shake the thoughts of Samuel, the quiet mechanic with the deep brown eyes and the smile that made her feel something real. Olivia's world felt increasingly more like a mask that hid everything she yearned for. She had everything, a life of luxury, a father who controlled entire industries, but none of it meant anything when compared to the honesty she had felt in Samuel's presence. The following Saturday, she found herself standing by the gates of her family's mansion, looking out at the street below. Her chauffeur stood a few paces away, waiting patiently for her to give the order to leave. Her hands tightened around the strap of her purse as she wrestled with her emotions. "Olivia." Her father's voice sliced through her thoughts. Thomas Harding, standing tall in his tailored suit, looked every bit the formidable businessman he was. But it was the cold, calculating nature in his eyes that always made Olivia feel like a pawn in his game. "I've just come from a meeting with the Carters. They are the perfect match for you." The Carters, the family her father had chosen for her. They were wealthy, respected in the business world, and, most importantly, already well entrenched in the social circles her father controlled. Olivia had met the Carters a few times, and though their son, Daniel, was handsome, he lacked the warmth and spark Samuel had ignited in her heart. But her father had set his sights on the union, and nothing she said would ever change his mind. "I'm not interested, father," Olivia said, her voice steady but firm. Thomas Harding raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback by her sudden defiance. "You're not interested. He repeated her words, as if they were unthinkable. "You'll do as you're told. It's time for you to start thinking of the family, Olivia. You're no longer a little girl." Olivia fought to suppress the frustration building inside her. She couldn't stand it anymore. This life of being treated as an object, a trophy, to be passed off to another family. A life where her own desires and dreams didn't matter. "I don't want to marry Daniel Carter," she said, finally meeting her father's gaze. "I don't want to be someone's pawn in your game." Her father's face hardened. The smile that had once been so warm now replaced with a cold, intimidating expression. "You have no choice in the matter, Olivia. The Hardings always marry within their circle. Your feelings don't come into play here." His words, though harsh, didn't stop the whirlwind inside her. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to rebel, to shout, to break free, but she couldn't. She knew the consequences. To defy her father would mean breaking with everything she had ever known. But then, she thought of Samuel. His quiet strength, his laughter, his touch. "I'm not a part of your world, father," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "And I don't want to be." Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving her father standing there, his eyes narrowed in disbelief. She had made a choice, even if it was the hardest one she had ever made. Meanwhile, Samuel couldn't escape the turmoil brewing in his mind. The cafe by the bridge had been a turning point. Olivia's words, her touch, everything about her had stayed with him, haunting him, even as he tried to move forward with his own life. Samuel's friends had noticed his change in behavior. He was quieter, more distracted, and though they teased him about the rich girl, Samuel knew that this wasn't just some fling. It was something more, something deeper. But he couldn't deny the reality. They lived in two completely different worlds. Olivia had wealth and privilege. Samuel had his hands dirty with grease and oil, working day in and day out to make ends meet. There was no place for someone like him in her world, and he had no place in hers. Still, when Olivia reached out to him again, this time, asking him to meet her outside the city for a walk along the riverbank, Samuel couldn't bring himself to say no. "I don't care about your wealth, Samuel," Olivia had said during their last conversation. "I care about what I feel when I'm with you." Samuel didn't know how to process that. His heart wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that there could be a future for them, but his mind kept reminding him of the truth. She was meant for a different life, a life far from his. But on that crisp Saturday afternoon, as he stood by the riverbank, waiting for Olivia, Samuel could no longer deny the pull between them. The first time they had met, it felt like a fleeting moment, a spark that could easily have been snuffed out. But now, it was different. Now, it felt like fate. When Olivia arrived, the weight of her family's expectations visible in her stiff posture, she gave Samuel a hesitant smile. "I didn't think you'd come," she admitted. "I couldn't stay away," Samuel replied quietly, his voice carrying a sense of finality. They stood there for a moment, not speaking, just taking in each other's presence. The water flowed gently by, a reminder that time, once lost, could never be reclaimed. But in this moment, with Olivia standing before him, time didn't matter. What mattered was the pull, the undeniable chemistry, and the spark between them. "Samuel," Olivia began, her voice soft and vulnerable. "I can't live in that world anymore. I can't do what my father wants me to do. I don't want to be just a trophy. I don't want to be a part of a game I never asked to play." Samuel looked at her, his heart swelling with a mixture of admiration and concern. He knew the road they were considering was a dangerous one. "But you don't understand, Olivia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "If you walk away from that life, you'll lose everything. Your father won't just let you go. There will be consequences." "I'm willing to face them," she replied, her gaze unwavering. "Because I'd rather face those consequences than live a life that's not my own." The wind stirred, and for the first time in a long time, Olivia felt a sense of peace. It was a quiet rebellion, but it was hers. And in Samuel's eyes, she saw that same rebellion, that same yearning for something more. "I'll be here, Olivia," Samuel said, his voice low. "But we need to be careful. We can't let the world see us. Not yet." Olivia nodded, her heart aching with a mix of fear and hope. She knew that what they were about to embark on was dangerous, but for the first time, she felt like she was choosing something real, something that belonged to her, not to the world. From certain. As they begin to give in to the forbidden pull between them, they face an uncertain future, one filled with danger, passion, and the ultimate test of their love. Will they survive the collision of their worlds? Or will the weight of their choices destroy them both? Stay tuned for the next chapter in Our Love Never Grows Old where their love story continues to unfold, and the stakes rise higher than ever before.